Okay, Angela and Jean, are you guys hearing me? I'm not hearing anything, so I'm not sure if you guys are ready or not. Okay, I'm going to go ahead then and get started. I'll keep an eye here, Angela and Jean, on the question box in case for some reason I'm not coming.
Sorry, we're hearing you. We just manipulated it because you weren't a presenter. So you should be able to hear us now, and we can hear you loud and clear.
Great, great. Thanks, Angela. Alrighty, so I'll go ahead and get started. So good morning, everyone. Happy August. You know what happened to June and July, right? So I'm here this morning, Kristen Leewald, PVAS Statewide Project Director for PDE, here sharing on behalf of Deputy Secretary Matt Stem, new Keystone business rules with regard to students who retest on Keystone exams. And I'm specifically talking about new Keystone business rules for PVAS district and school growth calculations, meaning PVAS district and school growth reporting. That means new business rules which impact school year 15-16 PVAS reporting will be released on October the 6th, as well as you know, those measures being a part of the school performance profile, the indicators of academic growth. So this is the first sharing of this information. If you guys could advance my slides. It doesn't appear that, yeah, thanks. When I'm talking about changes in business rules, I'm talking about changes in business rules for the Keystone reporting only, for PVAS district and school reporting, as well as the SPP indicators of academic growth, meaning the reporting release for PVAS district reporting should be PVAS school reporting, and the SPP, which will be released in early October. The slides that I have included today have a lot of details in them. There will be a document that will be available including these details, but I'm going to ask, this is probably not the most exciting part of the session today. The slides have a lot of words on them, but that's intentional to make sure everybody gets the same language in sharing this information. These new business rules only apply to PVAS district school reporting, as well as the indicators of academic growth on the SPP. There are no changes made to the business rules for PVAS teacher-specific reporting. What I'm talking about here today with the Keystones has no impact on the PVAS teacher-specific reporting. We're just talking about district and school reporting with PVAS for Keystones, as well as the SPP indicators of the academic growth for Keystones. Next slide. Sorry, I keep trying to change it myself. What's your role with regard to this information I'm getting ready to share? Deputy Secretary Stem has asked that you, as IUs, be the vehicle to communicate this information to your local LEA administrators. So the information I'm sharing with all of you today as state leads, you'll want to make sure gets shared back with your colleague IUs that you work with in your respective regions, as this is the mechanism we're using for communication of this information. For IUs to make sure they share this back with their local district administrators and school administrators. There will be a document with these details that will be posted on the PVAS login page. I don't have a date yet on that, hence we're using today's statewide system of support webinar as a vehicle to get this information to you so you can then communicate it to district and school administrators at your beginning of the year job-alike meetings, you know, with superintendents, assistant superintendents, principals, etc. Next slide. So where's Next slide. Yeah. So where's PDE coming from? What's the context for this change in the new business rules for the Keystones? Well, first of all, PDE is committed to supporting thoughtful and strategic reassessment of students on Keystone exams, with the goal being for students to perform as well as possible and reach their academic potential. As a result of that, an interest in having people really focus on thoughtful and strategic reassessment of students. PD has changed the rules for including Keystone scores from students who've retested when calculating the growth measures for districts and schools. The intent of the change is to make sure that LEAs are not negatively impacted if for some reason students do not perform as expected or perform as predicted when they reassess with a Keystone, following, instruction to get them, up to proficiency. So again, this is to make sure the intent behind this is that LEAs are not negatively impacted in any way if students do not perform as expected when they reassess on a Keystone. So that's the overall context and intent with this change in the business rules. Now let's go to the next slide, Angela. So starting with the fall release of the school year 15-16 PBAS and district and school reporting, a student's highest Keystone assessment score from the school year 15-16 will be used to calculate district and school growth unless that score is lower than a score from previous years. So the overarching concept and intent is to use a student's highest score. And if that score is from the most recent year, that score would be used. If there's a score that's higher in previous years, then those scores from our 15-16 school year would not be used. And therefore that student would not be included in the analyses. So let's walk through some more details on this. Next slide, please. So again, kind of big picture concept here as you think about that idea of using highest score for measuring growth. It's not exactly how it's done when we're looking at, determining the percentage of students who are proficient or advanced and scores are banked till grade 11. That's not how this is being looked at in that exact same way. However, it's bringing it into conceptual alignment with the concept of giving schools, that opportunity to use that best score that a student would have when measuring growth. For measuring growth in the use of Keystone scores, only Keystone scores from a full administration of a Keystone exam will be considered for use in the analyses. So for example, if a student retakes Module 2, that score from Module 2 wouldn't be used. The student actually has to completely take the full Keystone exam. And that's not new with PBAS. That's nothing new. It's been that way since day one. Student has to take the full Keystone exam. They then get in the data file what's called an admin scale score, which means they have taken Module 1 and Module 2. They've taken that full Keystone exam and then receive a full what's called an admin scale score. That's a little, and we point that out because that is a little different than how achievement is calculated when the scores are banked till grade 11. They take the best performance from each module and combine that into a score that's then used for grade 11 for determining percent proficient advanced. We're conceptually bringing growth into alignment with how achievement is measured by taking an approach of using highest score if that highest score is in the most recently tested school year, the reporting year that we're looking at, but it is a little bit different than the details for how percent proficient advanced is done for grade 11. But again, concept, keep the concept in mind, using highest score to date. All right, next one, Angela. Did we miss a slide there? Go back one slide. I'm thinking we missed a slide. Yeah, okay, yeah. So the rules, I've said this a couple times, but I just want to make sure this is what you want to be clear with communicating to your LEAs, that these new rules will apply to district and school value-added reporting and the indicators of academic growth in the SPP, starting with our school year 15-16 reporting, which will be the reporting released this fall. Growth data for previous years, we're not going back and recalculating using, these new rules. That will stand as is. But the reporting that will be released in October in the SPP on the PBAS website will reflect this change in the business rules. Next slide. So what are we talking about? And this is probably the slide you're going to want to take a look at, and read, a few times before you get ready and prepare yourself to talk to your districts. This is kind of the meat of it. If a student has previously, and this first bullet, this is not new. This is not new. This has always been the way things have been handled, but we're trying to, make sure all the information's here together. If a student is previously tested in the proficient or advanced range on a Keystone, no subsequent scores in that subject would be included. In other words, if they were already proficient, they've been excluded from the analyses with our prior business rules and would continue to be excluded, because according to PD policy, students have already scored at least proficient should not be retested on a Keystone. So let's go to bullet 2. If a student tested in school year 15-16 or in a previous school year and were retesting in 15-16 but scored lower on the retest in school year 15-16, the score from the retest in school year 15-16 would not be included. Why? Because we're looking for the highest score. And if that highest score is not in the year we're looking at, those scores, that student will be excluded from the analyses. Third bullet, if a student tested, let's say, multiple times in school year 15-16, the highest score from that year would be used in the analyses, unless that score is lower than a score from previous years. So again, bottom line, big concept we're looking at, in the current year of reporting that's being analyzed, that we're working on, did that student get their highest score in that subject or grade? If yes, then the score from that year would be used. If not, that student would be excluded from the analyses because their higher score came in a previous year. All right, next slide. Now, other exclusion rules, not new, still apply. Once they've determined which students have their highest score in school year 15-16, then other exclusion rules come into play. If students were not enrolled for a full academic year, they would be excluded. First year ELL students are excluded and foreign exchange students are excluded. This is not new. This has been how things have been handled since day one. All right, next slide. So I'm going to walk through 2 examples. First one is a student who tested multiple times in school year 15-16. This is a student who took the Keystone Algebra 1 exam 2 times in school year 15-16. Let's say they tested in the winter and they tested in the spring. This student does not have any previous scores in prior school years. They did not take the Keystone Algebra 1 exam prior to school year 15-16. So in school year 15-16, in the winter test administration, the student scored a 1450. Well, first, was this in the proficient range? No, it was not. So this score is eligible, for consideration to be included in the analyses because it was not a proficient score. Now, the student then took the assessment again in the spring. They retested. In the spring administration, the student scored a 1433. Because the spring score was lower and there was no scores in prior years, first of all, that spring score will not be used in the analyses for district and school reporting for PBAS or towards that SPP. However, it is that winter administration score, the 1450, that would be used. That's the highest score during this year, and there's no prior scores in previous years. All right, let's go to example 2. So this is kind of a nice simple example to start with for people to get them understanding that concept of let's just talk about one school year at a time. Second example, student tested in a previous year and they retested in school year 15-16. So they've taken Keystone exam, at least fully taken the Keystone exam in 2 different school years. In this example, the student took the Keystone Algebra 1 exam in the spring of 2014-15 and scored a 1490. They then, weren't proficient, got some kind of support, and then come spring of 2015-16, they retested. They scored a 1485. So because the score from school year 15-16 spring administration is lower than a score from a previous year, that 15-16 score would not be used. Since that's the only score the student has in 15-16 and their highest score was from the previous school year, this student would not be included in the school year 15-16 analyses. Again, think what we're going after here. We're going after highest score. When did that student have their highest score? If their highest score was in the current year of reporting that we're looking at, then that's the score that would be used. And if not, they would be excluded. So in summary, what are you all being asked as next steps as each of the IUs to communicate? To communicate this information to your local LEA administrators, district and school administrators. And if you or anyone has any questions about the new rules for including students' Keystone scores in the PVAS district score SPP analyses, to send an email into our team. Again, there will be a document that will be posted on the PVAS login page. You don't want to wait to have this communication with districts for that document to be posted. You can use the information from the slides I've included here today. So Angela and Jean, anything else you need me to do, or any questions or anything?
Kristen, Jean and I were just quickly wanting to make sure that these presentation slides, we are recording this session and we send it out statewide, but we just want to make sure that it's okay for folks to actually have the slides and that they can use them with their LEAs.
Yes, this is the language has been cleared by Deputy Secretary Stem. Yes.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
I'm just going to look and check the chat box. It looks like there's some questions, so let me just see. Questions are, Kristen, can you go back to example 1, please? And kind of, I guess they would like you to kind of give an analysis of that. So we're going to send the slides. Let me just go through some of the questions. Will you send the slides from Nikki? Yes, we will. We'll send them via email. Kristen, can you go back and look at example 1, please, for Philomena? And then from Beth Ann, so they are being completely excluded, so their past scores will not be used either. Is that correct? That's from Beth Ann. Kristen, does that make
if a student, let me first say, if a student's higher score, so let's just take the school year 15-16 reporting. If our concept is we're going to include students highest score was obtained in school year 15-16. And then, of course, if all the other little business rules were met, like enrolled for a full academic year, not a first-year ELL student, et cetera. Those are kind of course, kind of business rules. But the big concept here we're talking about is, did a student have their highest score in school year 15-16? If they did, and if they had more than one score, which is the highest of those two, is their highest score in school year 15-16. If not, then that student will be excluded from the district value-added reporting, the school value-added reporting, the indicators of academic growth, because they would not have achieved their highest score in the year of reporting and analyses that is being provided.
Okay.
We're going to go back to the slide 1 example.
And Philomena, then if there's some specific questions that you have, I'm going to unmute your mic to address those. So Philomena, give me 1 second and let me find you and unmute you, and then you can walk through some of your questions with Kristen. Okay, Philomena, you should be unmuted.
Hey, Philomena.
Hi, Kristen.
Do you want me to walk through this one again, or just need to look at it a second?
If they took it 2 times in 15-16, why isn't it being used? Why aren't we using the highest score if they took it 2 times and didn't take it in the previous year? It says will be used. I'm sorry. Yeah. I thought it said will not. Oh, wait. Is it will be used or will not be used?
Well, so if we look, this student only ever in their entire life has taken the Keystone Algebra exam twice. They took it both of those times in school year 15-16. When they first took it in the winter, they got a 1450. Then they retook it again. They were not, that's not proficient. They retook it again in the spring. They got a 1433. That spring score would not be used because that's the lower score. So the score of 1450, their highest score, which happens to be in school year 15-16 because they don't have any prior year scores, the 1450 would be used. Therefore, this student would be included in the school year 15-16 analyses unless they weren't enrolled for a full academic year, some of the other business rules.
Oh, I was reading it's not being used, meaning it's not being used at all. You're just saying the 1450 is not being used, but the 1433 is.
Correct.
I mean, reversed. I'm sorry. You're saying the 1450 is being used, just not the 1433.
Correct. So the second and last score, because the spring score was lower, it will not be used in the analyses, but the student score from the winter administration, the 1450, will be used instead.
Oh, dear God, it's right there. Thank you.
Okay. This is a lot of weeds. I know we're giving out to you guys right here, so it's okay.
I got it. I just wanted to clarify. Thank you.
Absolutely. Any others, Angela?
Thanks, Philomena. Kristen, there was one question. They just wanted to go back to the PVAS login page, so I'm going to try to find that here. Let's see.
About the document being posted?
Yeah, so where is that?
Right back. You just were there 2 slides ago, I think.
There we go.
Yeah, right there. Yeah.
So this is the information about the PDE has asked that you communicate this and that it will be documented, be posted on the PVAS login page. The PVAS state team will get the lists in email.
Yeah, I'll send an email to the listserv. Yeah.
Kristen, this is Jean also. Can you reiterate the purpose of this analysis, what it is or isn't being used for? I think that's an important...
Yes, so it is being used. No changes to PVAS teacher reporting. This has zero to do with PVAS teacher-specific reporting. This is only about growth measures at district and school level, meaning PVAS district reporting that'll be on the PVAS website, PVAS school reporting on the PVAS website, and therefore, because the PVAS value added at the school level, you know, using the business rules, that means this also then connects with the indicators of academic growth for the SPP.
SPP. Okay, great.
Thank you.
So, Kristen, we got another question here from Karen. She says, what if the score increases, but the performance level is the same? For example, in school year 14-15, the student scores a score that equals basic. In school year 15-16, the student scores a higher score, but is still basic. That student is then counted in the analysis in both years. Is that correct?
We take 1 year, we take that 1 year of reporting that we're looking at. So if we're looking at school year 15-16, as you think about PVAS reporting, it doesn't matter what performance level a score is in. We are completely, totally looking at the highest score to date. And if that highest score for a student is in that, you know, current year of reporting for, you know, 15-16, the one we're getting ready to roll out here in 15-16, if that's when that student got the highest score, then that would be used. Doesn't matter if it's a proficient or a non-proficient score. Not sure if I quite got at your question.
No.
But we're not going back and doing any prior years of reporting, changes to, you know, school year 14-15, 13-14. We're only looking at the new reporting for school year 15-16 and then moving forward, you know, as directed by PDE.
So the point you're making, this is Jean again, just to clarify, is we are looking at if there are 2 scores, we're looking at the higher of the 2 scores regardless of the level of proficiency. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. They could be, let's say a student in 15-16, you know, just tested on the Keystone exam for the first times in school year 15-16. They tested in the winter, they tested in the spring. Both scores were in the below basic range. Doesn't matter. PVAS doesn't need our cut scores for proficiency when measuring growth. They only need the scaled scores. So they would, of those 2 scores, pick the highest of those 2 scores, even though they both happen to be in the below basic range, let's say.
Thanks, Kristen. I think that addresses Lori's question, which she just said, in summary, any keystone given as a course, we would use the highest score for the district or the school growth measure.
Yeah, we're not talking courses here anymore. We're just talking scores. Remember, we're not doing that tracking by course thing anymore. If kids are enrolled or not enrolled, you know, in a course. That's for district and school. That's off the table. We're just saying what scores are we using or not using.
Excellent.
So probably questions. Karen, I guess, and Karen Henricks, you might have some more specifics maybe I did or did not address well in my answer. If I missed the point, pop me a message and, you know, we can work through that, or anybody else that has any questions. Feel free.
Kristen, you rock as always. Excellent presentation and information. And next time we have you on SSOS, I'll make sure that I send you the originator so you can control the screen. Thanks.
Oh, that's okay. All good.
Right, return it over to Deb.
So much.
Thanks. All right, you're on.
All right. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for taking the time today. We're going to talk a little bit about STEM and the upcoming STEM competition for 2016-2017. I just want to first start off for a thank you with all the IU leadership, all the state systems and supports leadership. We were able to engage in our stakeholder sessions and start to drive towards those 3 short-term priorities that we discussed towards those stakeholder sessions. And just a little bit of information around them. We engaged over 250 stakeholders across the Commonwealth. We have thousands of data points that we're looking at in all 4 of those buckets. And when we think about next steps coming up in the future, we're going to be sharing that data with IU leadership so that they can disseminate that to those 250 stakeholders for them to sift through some of those data points to look for themes. And then we'll come back together and reconvene this fall to discuss some of the themes that we've pulled out so we can solidify those first 3 short-term priorities and get prepared for holding a state-level task force around STEM education across the Commonwealth. So I really appreciate all the support across the state. Every convener was very gracious in space and time and just did a phenomenal job of reaching out to the community and getting stakeholders that are truly engaged in this space at all parts of the continuum, whether you are a high-functioning STEM school, STEM district, part of STEM leadership in your community, or if you're just interested in dipping your toes in that space. We were able to get feedback from folks across that continuum, educators, engineers, chambers of commerce, workforce investment boards, higher ed, Octal. It really was a diverse group, and that is all thanks to the IU leadership reaching out into their communities and focusing on who are the best folks to be at the table to shape the direction of STEM education in the Commonwealth. So kudos to everybody for all of that support. Part of the direction that we want to go moving forward in 2016-17 and helping us to meet our short-term and long-term priorities is the STEM competition. And one of those long-term priorities is to diversify and increase the number of Pennsylvania students in STEM-related post-secondary and workforce opportunities. And the state STEM competition provides some wonderful pathways for students to learn about different careers, to find mentors, and to begin to build their STEM identity for success in the future. And that competition has been supported with resounding effect through the IU system. 4 of the generalized priorities that we get out of the competition are to build STEM literacy and the student STEM identity. This allows students to build their college and career ready skills, and a lot of this is around some of the skills that your stakeholders have articulated, whether it's the presentation piece and being able to communicate, whether it's the design piece, designing solutions that are authentic within the community. The STEM competition drives that, and all of these are skills that your stakeholders have said are important to their students, their districts, and the business and industry in their community. The STEM competition also helps to provide authentic learning experiences for students. They get to solve problems within their community, and then it also expands equitable access to STEM experiences. So I'll share some of that information from the competition. When you think about that equitable access, we've had 180 teams from 27 IUs registered in the competition at the regional level. So when you think about 180 teams, 5 students per team, we've reached almost 800 students in last year's competition alone in providing authentic STEM experiences. When we look at just the state level, we've had 24 teams attend the state competition, and when we sort of start to unpack that, we had 117 students engaged at the state competition, and 36% of those students were female, while 64% were male. We, of course, want to increase the opportunity for our female students and those students who are historically underserved, but we're doing a really nice job at engaging folks outside the normal realm of STEM education. And as you know, the governor just signed some recent legislation around computer science. The competition drives towards computer science education. So many of the projects engage students in coding and computational thinking and using those particular skills to solve problems. And so that is teeing up our students to be not just consumers in this highly driven tech economy, but to be the innovators and the problem solvers within that particular space within our economy. So this competition is a high priority not only for the department, but it's a high priority for our business and industry leaders with developing those skills and those experiences that make our students marketable for those post-secondary opportunities. So that's just a brief synopsis of last year's competition alone. When we think about moving forward into this year's competition, I just want to remind us a little bit about what the roles are of the intermediate unit, the school district, and the student teams. So when we think about some of the roles of the intermediate unit, which are many, there are a couple highlights that we need to consider moving forward. One of those is to hold the competition in February. Each IU, or in collaboration with other IUs, gets to hold the regional competition in the month of February. Another important and key component to that is identifying and selecting STEM judges. And I want to pause here for a moment because I think this provides an opportunity for IUs and for school districts to start getting out into their community and understanding what assets are to leverage. So when you think about a STEM judge, think about reaching broader into your personal toolkit of folks that you can draw upon. So can we think about getting a female engineer as a STEM judge or a person of color as a STEM judge? Can we think about getting a business leader and getting out beyond just the retired educator or current IU or district employees, but trying to use the regional competition as a platform to generate deeper partnerships, to think about those agreements and opportunities for kids through the district. So try to use those STEM judges as a leverage point to broaden our scope. And then also the intermediate unit responsibility will be to disseminate the competition information. So whether that's the competition packet, whether that's the rubrics, just ensuring that all of our teams in our districts have consistent and concise information around the competition. Now, I will say that all of this information will be available on the website, but we want to make sure that the districts also are able to get a hard copy. When we think about some of the information that needs to be communicated, that includes what the school district's role is going to be. So each school district can register one team per school district. That doesn't mean that internally school districts can't have a little internal competition to determine what team is registered. So if they know that there are several teams that are going to come out of that district, we may want to think about how can we increase that opportunity within districts, even though that only one district can be, or one team can be represented per district. Of that team, it needs to be 5 members, and they can be 9th through 12th grade. And I encourage all districts to engage their 9th graders. Last year, the winning team was a group of 10th graders, so it doesn't have to be just that senior group that seems to be mature enough to engage in this space. Any of those individuals in 9th through 12th grade can come to the competition and be successful. And then we need at least one teacher advisor. And that teacher advisor is going to be the guide on the side that helps to find a community contact, that helps to find a engineering mentor or a business mentor or a computer coding mentor, whomever helps drive home the solution that the teams come up with to their problem. And then when we look at that student team, this is where the rubber really gets to hit the road, and the students get to build that STEM identity or explore that career or post-secondary opportunity through solving a community problem. So part of what we want them to do is go out in their community and identify a situation or a problem that they want to generate a solution for. Then they're going to research that problem, they're going to research possible solutions, and finally, they're going to engage in designing, building, and testing that solution. And that all goes back to that process, that iterative process goes back to developing some of those STEM skills that our stakeholders have identified as essential for success in a budding STEM economy in Pennsylvania. So a couple important dates and times to consider. The first touch point, of course, is this particular meeting and getting the information out to our leadership so that they can start to tee up folks across the Commonwealth and get them excited about the STEM competition. After this meeting, we're going to follow next week with a pen link. And within that pen link, there will be the important dates and the important touch points. A couple of things to consider. September 14th, the website will go live. When that website goes live, it will have our new state and regional rubrics. It will also have a new twist that we're adding to the competition, and one of those twists is going to be a new project in the box at the regional level. And then for the state level competition, we're going to have a video component that teams are going to engage in as they get ready for their presentation in May. And then second important point is September 30th will be registration ends. So if schools have multiple teams that want to engage, they need to think about having some type of vetting process by September 30th so they can select that one team that can represent their school district. On October 28th, the competition packets will be released and distributed to all regional teams. And then finally, the next big date would be for the IUs. By February 2017, the regional competitions will take place. And I do want to remind all IUs that as you're looking at registration, if we see that there's low numbers in a particular IU, you are encouraged to collaborate with the neighboring IU to have more of a regional style competition so that no team, no district is denied an opportunity to engage in the STEM competition. And if you need help or districts need help navigating that process, we're here to help navigate and facilitate that. And then finally, if you have any other questions or concerns about the STEM competition, I'll be the contact this year, so please just reach out to me either via email or phone. And if you can't get a hold of me, I'm sure Angela would be willing to help facilitate some of those conversations. So if there's any other questions, part of the website release, there'll be more of an articulated timeline that has multiple dates and touch points for IUs, districts, and state level teams to consider.
Thank you, Jed. I know that PDE leadership is going to be having further conversations around some of the deliverables in the state system of support. And there are some specific questions that folks have around the deliverables for STEM, but we want to honor the process, and currently that is that PDE leadership is going to be meeting with PAIU leadership around some of those specifics. So we'll be able to give you more of a heads up on the next steps on that, but I do want to say that, you know, Judd has done an amazing job going across the state, getting feedback, and I think we're really positioned to speak to what's going on in STEM education. We know that IUs are leaders in this arena. We also know that we have exemplary districts doing stuff that's getting national attention, and as a part of some of these resources and toolkit that will be developed this year that we're going to be asking you to be the operational arm for, it will be to help leverage what currently is in place, kind of doing an analysis and audit of what's happening in your districts, helping us find who are the exemplary folks doing this work so that PDE can develop a set of voluntary resources that allow for LEAs to engage. We also know, and you know, the governor's STEM competition is critical, but Judd is also going to be looking a lot with computer science as a component of that, developing possibly voluntary model curriculum K-12 for computer science, which is a component of both, you know, the current administration's desires, as well as a national movement, you know, really being propelled by the United States Department of Ed. And in the spring of 2017, Judd will be working with you guys to think through a hackathon and what that will look like. So lots of exciting things, lots of opportunities for us to partner and be a common voice. And I'll close with saying this from the STEM piece. It's that, you know, if we can leverage a common statewide vision, this isn't about the state dictating any particular approach. It's about the state giving us resources that allow us to help our LEAs think strategically about what they're have going on in their districts, about partnering with other districts with the intermediate units. But if we can build that cohesive vision of STEM in Pennsylvania, PDE and IUs will be positioned for applying for public-private partnerships and resources that we can leverage much better at the state level than individual districts applying for grants and IUs. So we know you'll continue to do that, but this is our push, the push of the administration to really kind of help us position ourselves for those types of opportunities. Jean?
And this is Jean with just a bit of a postscript. We're going to talk a little bit later about our SAS Institute, and Judd will tell you a little bit about his plans for a STEM showcase the Monday evening of the SAS Institute. So maybe that's a bit of marketing or public relations, and we'll share that with you shortly.
Perfect.
Thank you, Angela.
Jean. All right, so this is, the next component is a brief update on ESSA. As you know, we have been having the specific stakeholder work groups that are working with the department to give feedback. We have our last stakeholder work group on August 30th at Harrisburg Area Community College in the Midtown campus. Many of you are involved in that work. We have a lot of really diverse people at the table in the different groups. We have an accountability group, we have educator evaluation group, we have teacher certification group, and an assessment group. And the PDE liaisons in each of those four groups are really simply just watching the process. So for example, I'm a part of the educator evaluation group, but my job isn't to insert my opinion. It really is to validate and honor what folks are saying in those respective groups. Secretary Rivera has spoken to this plan for ESSA being the state, this is your plan, this is the LEA's plan, this is the Pennsylvania plan, not some dictate from the department. So we're really excited about that. Those work groups are continuing. If you are interested, everything is being kept up to date on the PDE website, on the ESSA website. So you will be able to see the minutes, you'll be able to see the conversations being had, and that component of the website is being kept up in real time. Sam Koch and Adam Schott are the primary liaisons at the department, facilitating kind of and orchestrating this work for the state. So if you have specific questions, feel free to connect with them directly. If you need their contact information, contact Gina or I and we'll connect you. So that's just a quick update on ESSA. So the next update I wanted to give you, and this is kind of interesting because we've been going around calling it Senate Bill 880, but it is actually Act 1 of 2016, which is Senate Bill 880. And as you well know, Senate Bill 880 was passed at the end of February. It gave the department a very specific task, which was to solicit feedback on alternates to graduation. You guys were a critical part in doing that. As you know, Rich, myself, and the Center for Assessment went across the state for those 6 months, solicited feedback, not just from K-12, but also from chamber folks, workforce investment, parents, and we got a lot of diverse feedback. We shared this with you guys, but if you haven't seen the report, it is available. There are basically 4 options that PDE is recommending to the General Assembly. The first option would be what we call a compensatory model, which allows students to demonstrate that they are more skilled in one area than another, and basically an overall composite score would need to reflect a specific level of proficiency, but there are definitely some parameters associated with that, and if you're interested in it, you should check out the report. The second option would be for students to demonstrate proficiency on other types of assessments, be they SAT, ACT, AP, IB, and we see this more as kind of a catch, right? So for example, a student is below basic in a particular area and was able to demonstrate proficiency in another area, or if they're cut score, so it's more of a fill-in for other assessments on how they performed on Keystones. But we also know that our students who are, getting 3 or higher in AP Calc are going to pass Algebra 1 Keystone. So this option 2 was more about giving LEAs kind of some more autonomy. The third option is for our students who are what we call CTE concentrators, and basically they have to be a part of a planned course of study, and be leaving with a clear understanding as to what they want to do moving forward. We know the timeliness of the NOCD and NIMS kind of don't necessarily lend themselves to being included for consideration around graduation, but what we do know is that a student who has demonstrated proficiency aligned to their planned course of study in an approved CTE has met all of the specific benchmarks associated with those programs of studies. And we recognize clearly that those benchmarks are very, very, very valid measures of students' levels of career readiness. So that would be the third option, but the students would also be able to have to demonstrate proficiency on a course grade. So they might not be able to pass the Keystone, but did they get a passing grade on a Keystone-related course? And this is where there is a slight difference between what PDE is proposing than what is in Chapter 4. Although we assume kids take courses related to the Keystones, and hopefully, so nobody's making a kid take a Keystone that they haven't had access to the content to learn it. The reality is that PDE has no requirement currently in Chapter 4 for course taking. We teach to the standards. The students need to have the demonstrated proficiency against the standards. What's slightly different than PDE is recommending is that kids actually have to take and pass the course. So the idea here is that if standardized assessments aren't the sole measure to determine whether a kid is ready, then their completion of the course as locally determined would provide a student with multiple opportunities to demonstrate their proficiency beyond a once and done standardized assessment. So that's the third option. The CTE concentrator still has to take the course. He just doesn't necessarily have to pass the Keystone, but they do have to have demonstrated proficiencies aligned to the benchmarks associated with the planned course of study. And then the last option is basically for a kid who's not a CTE concentrator, and this student would be a student who takes the courses and passes the courses, so has grades that reflect that, and have demonstrated a career plan. They have a clear, explicit plan for what they're moving forward with. So this would align with 339, but as you will see in the report, the department is recommending that we kind of beef up the expectations around that and kind of explicitly define what would be in a career plan for students. So stay tuned. If the General Assembly approves and adopts this through statute, then we will be convening groups to engage in that work to help us explicitly define what's in those career plans. I neglected to mention, and I guess it's here though, is that one of the options, one of the considerations that we got from tons of districts was, you know what, just give us a model syllabus and course with common assessments for these respective content areas. Just give it to us. Don't tell us we have to do it, but give it to us and let us go beyond it if we need to, but at least we know that this is a course that demonstrates, that has clearly built in what it is that students should know and be able to do, aligned to the standards, and they would demonstrate, a student who could do that would be able to demonstrate proficiency on the exams. Additionally, the department wants to make sure that if we go this course grade option, that Algebra 1 is Algebra 1 in Pennsylvania, that it's not Algebra and a half, you're grade 9, and Algebra 3/4 grade 10, and full algebra by grade 11, that algebra is algebra. Now, we're not saying the students don't need more time, it's not that, but that the content of what Algebra 1 is explicitly defined. So we were going to be, if this gets approved, pulling together folks to help us do that. Most districts have done this. A lot of our more affluent districts have built common assessments. So what we'll probably do is have kind of a assessment/curriculum symposium where people will bring their tools together, and then it is anticipated the department will do some kind of external audit process to consider alignment.
And for just to tag along what Angela just said in terms of the curriculum and the assessments, what we're really thinking is we're going to look at those frameworks that we built, which are simply that, they're frameworks, and sort of bulking them up, if you will, and along the lines of what she said as well, I know that there are some fabulous districts out there that have some true model curriculum. And my question to Matt was, if we vet some of this, we can likely also share some of the good work that the more exemplary districts have done. So when we start engaging in that work, we'll certainly be in touch. But I just want to remind you in that timeline for action, the only thing that has changed at this point is that we have a hiatus until the graduating class of 2019. So whether folks choose to do or not, that PBA site is still open. It is still available for schools to use, although we know that when day is done in the report to the assembly, the project-based assessment has been moved off the radar and out of the picture. Nonetheless, if you have students who are going to be enrolled in the project-based assessment who are graduating 2019 or beyond, we will not ignore those projects, and they will be graded and evaluated appropriately. So districts have asked that. There's also been the question that passing the Keystone exam, talking about the students now in 2017 and 18, or the project-based assessment is part of our policy, part of our graduation requirement. And the question was asked, can we log students into the project-based assessment for purposes of meeting state graduation local graduation requirements? And really the answer at this point is we're still sort of sticking by our, as Krista would say, our business rules that say at this point, based on what we know, you can move into the Keystone exams after your second failure. So nothing has changed at this point other than that 2019 hiatus. So let's keep that in mind. There are these beautiful options that, you know, we think will just fit nicely with needs of students, needs of district, and that sort of thing. So if you have any questions with regard to that, again, you know, give me a call or shoot me an email and we can talk through that.
I will say we have been getting a lot of questions around what should folks do, and ultimately it's a local decision. So for example, people are saying we're not going to do supplementary instruction, or we're not doing the PBAs, you know, what's PDE's stance on that? And we are absolutely saying that you can read the report, you can see that PDE is saying that they don't consider PBA as a viable option moving forward, but ultimately that's a determination that has to be made by the General Assembly. What you do locally is your call, but as Jean said, the department is committed to, if kids do the PBAs, that they will get them scored, obviously probably working with you guys to help get them scored.
Absolutely.
Okay, so that is kind of the piece. The other piece is the timeline for action. I'll just give you a thing, you know, it's interesting. The legislature asked that this report be done, you know, within 6 months, but they're not in session. So, you know, it was done, you know, it was done. We were breathing sighs of relief, and then, you know, it's sitting, I'm sure they've all read it though, but the reality is that they don't come back into session until I think it's mid-September, and then we've got an election. So, you know, there are things I'm hoping that, you know, folks are saying, well, when is this going to happen? And we don't know. I do think that this is obviously something that's going to be on the radar and hopefully would be addressed, you know, in the fall session, but we don't know. And given the fact that it's an election year, who knows? So basically, when we get asked that question, we say we don't know. Okay, I'm going to stop and see if folks have questions. Okay, I stopped, and I missed that Matt had a question for Judd, and Philomena has a question. So I'm going to stop, and I'm going to go first to Matt and see. Well, let me just conclude with the SB 880 update. Does anybody have any questions there before I jump back to STEM with Judd? And if you do, just type them in the chat box. Philomena, given the timing of your question, I'm going to see if your question is specific to ESSA or SB 880, and then I'll go to Matt's question. So Philomena, I'm unmuting you.
Actually, you just answered it, but probably the most questions I got about SB 880 was, do you know the time frame from when it will be adopted? So thank you.
Excellent. Okay. So if there's nothing else about ESSA or SB 880, I'm going to unmute Matt and let you ask your question to Judd about STEM. If I can find you. There we go. Okay, Matt, you should be unmuted.
Yep. Hey, Angela, can you go back to the slide where Judd had the timeline? I don't know if that's possible.
Absolutely.
my question is on timeline because I'm sure there's
September 3rd.
Yep, right there. The registration ends, and I guess that's where we either need one of two things, either a budge on the timeline, or we need more clarification on what is actually due from districts by September 13th, because that seems awfully shallow of a deadline with kids only coming back to school this week. And I think the other piece here is the fact that typically this Governor STEM competition has been sort of geared towards gifted and talented, whereas at least in our region we've been trying to encourage gifted and talented for all students. And so it's a matter of, like, September 30th is going to be about halfway through Q1 for schools.
Yeah.
And I was just asking if there's any variance or some reconsideration of that registration, or if it's just a matter of putting your name in the hat. Well, that's a different expectation, but to go a little deeper on that particular issue.
We can definitely go back to the well on the timeline. The September 30th was just the original discussion.
And what has been in place for the last few years.
So when we looked at the timeline for the last 2 years, it was like September 28th or the 26th. So we can push that timeline back into October to give districts more time to vet their teams. And as far as circle back on your gifted and talented question, we really want to see all students having the opportunity to engage in this space. And knowing that if it has to be run as like an after-school opportunity, or it's part of a group project within a class, that there's flexibility within the class that they can do that. We're in support of getting as many students as possible engaged in this process, and that it isn't just directed to our gifted and talented students.
The other piece that I do think is critical, Judd is saying, is that there will be this kind of video narrative that'll be a component. It'll be explicitly defined in the packets that get disseminated around what the expectations are. But I think being able to tell the story throughout the year and being able to showcase kids that maybe folks don't necessarily always think should be engaged in this work. This past summer, Judd worked with us and we developed for the first time with Science U at Penn State a STEM camp basically for kids with Asperger's that aligned with the Autism Initiative statewide, and we look at expanding that next year, and we really want to think differently about kind of what this means. How do we get all engaged? Given the Senate Bill 880 report, you're going to see kind of a clear definition and focus on career readiness. What are the types of jobs in Pennsylvania? What kind of industry certifications can kids be leaving with? All very much STEM related, all very much about kind of the types of jobs that are available in the Commonwealth. So anything you can do to help us and diversify the pools will be critical.
And Matt, just to reiterate your timeline, when the Penn link comes out next week, we'll look at pushing that back into October. Do you think that would give folks enough time to generate a deeper pool of opportunity for their kids?
Well, here, just it's all tactical stuff on the ground. So IUs are going to be having their first curriculum council, curriculum committee meetings in September, I assume. So getting that out to curriculum coordinators, and then building principal networks also would be launching at that time. Those are the people that you're going to be our biggest advocates to make sure that those kids get out of the building and go. And so I'm also thinking what it would also, at least in the western side of the state, the resources we have with Sprout Fund, Remake Learning, et cetera, the ecosystem we have, and I think, Judd, we talked about that at our regional meeting in IU1, we also could really get them to advocate for this and to support PDE's initiative and why this is important to have some exposure for all schools. So, and I can even talk to you offline about that too, as far as specific things out here. Tim Hale and I are watching this webinar right now. I'm just speaking on behalf of both of us. But certainly, I think if you push the date back, at least initially, that's going to help us get it out to schools and get more involvement. But then also considering about which partnerships we can build to advocate for innovation, STEM, et cetera.
Great.
Thanks, Matt, and we'll make sure to consider that, because ultimately we want as many kids as possible engaged.
All right.
Thank you.
The other piece is that the Penn link should be going out to districts also next week, so we'll get you that. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. I know we've got a short timeline, and Jean is reminding me of that, so I'm going to just quickly give you a quick SPP update and misconceptions, and then we're going to turn it over to Jean on her specific action items. First of all, I want to make sure that folks know we did the Math STEM conducted a webinar in June that was an invitation only event to people who participated in the sessions that Jean, Rich, and I did across the state on what should be included in updates to the SPP. We've gotten feedback from people saying, well, can you send that webinar out statewide? And we've been apprehensive to do that because we think in absence of the conversations that we had regionally, that the webinar is not going to make much sense. So, so that's kind of the general answer that we've given as folks have asked about that. What we want to make sure folks understand, though, is that the planned October release for SPP will be for all elementary schools this year. We still get questions, is there a pause? No, there isn't. Everybody will have SPP this year if they meet the criteria. So please make sure folks know that. And the SPP will reflect what is currently in regulations. It will be calculated with the current model. So the status of the revised SPP design is basically what Matt shared in June. There are conversations, ongoing conversations with the General Assembly about this. There definitely seems to be an openness to looking at measures beyond standardized tests to measure the efficacy of our schools. But we also have what's going on with ESSA, and kind of those things are parallel. So the department was ahead of the feds on this, but now given what we're doing with ESSA, we really do need to make sure there's alignment across that. So that is where we are, and hopefully that's enough and sufficient information that you can give your LEAs. I'm just going to stop real quick, see if there are any questions, and if not, we're going to turn it over to Jean. Okay, there's some specifics around STEM that are just guidance and feedback. We appreciate that, and we will make sure to share that with Judd so he can address it. But now I'm going to turn the presentation over to Jean.
Okay, thank you. Just in an effort to move forward, I'm going to be at your Curriculum Council up at IU15 in mid-September, so I'll talk about this more deeply, but just want to let you know that our SAS Institute scheduled December 4-6. You can see our theme at the top. We do have B. McGarvey, the author of Inevitable, there. We're also going to have Johanna Hayes, who is the National Current Teacher of the Year. And we also have a STEM showcase. Judd, can you just give a quick overview of what you're planning for that?
So the STEM showcase will be the evening event with dinner and beverages, and that's going to be more of a gallery walk and an opportunity for IUs, for districts from the pre-K to higher ed continuum, and then also for our STEM ecosystems to share and talk about the work and highlight the work that they're doing in STEM. And it's really just an event to elevate the conversation, to talk about the great things going on across the Commonwealth, and to continue to codify our communication network. You'll be getting, we're going to put an ask out, and we'll be vetting applications with the other asks that are a part of the SAS Institute. So we'll be hoping to see a lot of folks that are interested in sharing their story and sharing their narrative around STEM. And we may be asking also for 5 Pechakucha style presentations that we will pre-record for folks to learn and listen and gear up their understanding around STEM.
Okay, thank you so much. Just another quick few updates for you. With blessing to Lori Patton and Mike Webb, we did put together an ITQ for an Act 45 program to be offered. That will start on Sunday, December 4th. That'll run just for a few hours, and B. McGarvey is going to be running that session. If you have interest in learning more, you don't necessarily want to be part of the Act 45, but you want to join us to listen to what B has to say in more depth rather than her keynote, you'd be welcome to join us. I'll talk more about that. Here's a really exciting thing for me. We were able to work with Matt STEM, and we have $1 million that we're going to roll out for a personalized learning grant. And so $500,000 of that's going to go to our Alternative Ed for Disruptive Youth program. The other $500,000 will be for our more traditional, our LEAs. School by school. So you can apply for a grant of actually up to $100,000. So it's conceivable that if you have a really robust grant as a school, we could end up with 5 schools and 5 grants on our K-12 side, and our AEDY could be the same. So I'm going to share more of that with you. But on Wednesday, with the help of Intermediate Unit 8 and PLDC, we're going to do a workshop for those grantees. to move forward. So I'll know more when I meet with you in mid-September, because I'd really like for you to generate enthusiasm. This grant money would be available for schools not only who are new to this concept, but schools that want to promote, move forward, embellish, enhance. So it's not just for a district or a school that says, I am doing nothing in personalized learning and I want money to do something. It can also promote good work that's already being done. So just wanted to kind of get this on your radar, and we'll talk more then when we get together in September.
Jean, is it a school specific or district specific?
It is school specific, although your grant must be, your superintendent must sign off on the grant, and your grant team must include a central office individual, not necessarily your superintendent. Okay, so if you have any questions or comments on that, again, you can ship them to me, or we'll talk more deeply when we get together in mid-September. So next slide. I think we just have one or two more quick items, and I thank you for your indulgence.
As folks are, as you're going to talk about this real quick, I just want to acknowledge the fact that a lot of you are also on the focus and priority, that there was a focus and priority session. Okay, Rich, we're going to turn this over to you. There was a focus and priority session at the same time as today. We were alerted to that. We apologize if there was double booking, but we will make sure to do a better job coordinating with the folks leading the ARLs. So I just want to say that. I'm going to now turn it over to Rich and unmute Rich's mic. Okay, Rich, you should be okay now.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Current administration is considering the possibility of expanding the CDTs, go down to grades K to 2. There's initial thinking about this, and so we thought it would be prudent to talk to you to see to what extent you think there would be interest, especially in those schools that you're working with that are currently using the CDT. What do you think? We're looking for some feedback, some kind of a little bit of a focus group for a moment here, any market feedback about the potential. Now, this would be a different kind of a look and feel. It'll be developmentally appropriate kind of items. It'll be multiple choice. It'll be online. Lots of graphics, pictures, and human voice. So it'll be kind of a much different look and feel, more appropriate, of course, for these kids. So I know we don't have a lot of time, but is there a way to do a quick poll, get some feedback so we can share it with our leadership?
Yeah, so if you have some thoughts, just type them in the chat box or the question box, and I'm going to be monitoring that. And as things come up, Jean and I will kind of share with you. So I'm just going to say, Karen, you'll address the grant. Okay, let me just jump right to the CDT questions, and we can jump back to some of the other questions that folks had. Sarah, I believe you're asking about the CDT and whether or not it would be the same number of questions. So, Rich, do you still anticipate kind of a computer adaptive test where it would, the length of the test would depend on the student's zone of proximal development?
Right. It'll be a modified kind of computer adaptive test. There will be a set of items that we first develop to figure out, is the kid developmentally appropriate to even do this. So there'll be a way of ramping off and stopping the assessment. Then items will be delivered in clusters instead of one at a time. There'll be related items. There'll be, instead of 4 choices, there'll be 3 options. It'll be we'll call it a multi-stage adaptive kind of approach.
Okay. Folks are asking, like, are we thinking 48 to 60 questions? What do we anticipate the amount of time, et cetera? Do you have any thoughts on that?
I don't think we have those kinds of details worked out. We're at the very initial stages of this.
Okay, great.
Just when we look at all of the questions, and we have approximately half dozen that relate to this, time is going to be the cogent issue for a district as they consider whether or not they're going to offer them, Rich. So we'll share all these comments and questions,
okay,
but they all really focus around can't be too long. They need to be short, quick, and relatively simple. So that looked to be what we're seeing. And also Carrie Soliday said that she's had districts ask about CDTs at the K2 level, so that's sort of a positive indicator as well. And Lori from IU5 says it would be great for schools to have this data to be able to make some decisions at that primary level. Sarah also
Great.
says that we're looking at second grade, which is a critical need, which makes sense because they're moving into the PSSAs at the third grade. And Philomena, thank you, says she thinks it's a great idea. So in the sum and substance of it all, it looks like you're getting some quick and dirty positive feedback with the time, and of course there appears to be interest. Is that good enough for now, Rich?
Sounds great. Thanks, everyone.
Great,
Okay.
Rich. And Jean, I just want to go back. There was just a question specific to the grant, so I just want to make sure we address that.
Yeah, as far as the grant timeline, it's running through legal right now, and we know what that takes. However, when I come to you in mid-September, I will have something that you might be able to post in your Moodle, wherever you do your posting. So I have all the detail. Right now, we're at the conceptual level. We've put together an application. We're waiting for the legal folk to get back to us. We're working out the budget details, but what we're looking at is likely as not, to be very quick about it. I'd like to roll this out probably around mid-September when I meet with you folks, and then give folks about maybe a 4-week window to apply, and then we would actually announce those grants, announce them at the SAS Institute, but of course notify people likely in early November. So again, I'll give you more detail as it unfolds. And last but not least, and I'm not going to spend time on this, and this is actually a slide from another presentation that we had done with you. When we get to the point of ramping up that quarterly reporting again, just want to give you, these are sort of the 3 bullet reminders here. I'm not going to talk a whole bunch about it, but I'm going to read them to you, and we'll talk about this in more detail. I'll give you some really good examples, but just remember that the need for specificity in your reporting in that e-grant system is just a critical piece. More than that, we're not going to talk about right now. And actually, we've come to the end of the day and the end of the road, and we've spent 16 more minutes than we were asking you for. But if you have any questions about anything, you can email Angela and or me, and we will push them off to the right folks, be it Judd or Rich or anyone else.
The other thing I just want to mention is that, we've got kind of 2 things at play. And Tom, I want to just make sure that I have the most updated list of, I know that, IU folks have changed over the summer. So want to make sure we have the most updated list. This monthly meeting will be kind of a standard meeting that is for everybody. Anybody who's doing any work associated with PDE, this is for everyone. We also then have the leadership team, which we're going to then establish very specific kind of agendas with them. But I want to make sure that as we send this out, please send it to everybody that's working in special ed and curriculum, everybody in your IUs, so that this information is disseminated widely and it's getting to our district. So really, really appreciate you thinking about that, and that's why we post it on YouTube. We want you guys disseminating it and getting it out.
Yes, so Thank you and good day.
Thank you. Just check questions.